Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or
Yes.
anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
I know I hate these media people. They're the worst, awful, awful. But don't get hung up on it because it doesn't have that much of an effect. And they did report the emails, Wikipedia. They went after Hillary.
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks, yeah, excuse me.
By the way, just FYI,
I got to take a WikiLeaks.
I spent 3 hours with Julian Assange on Saturday at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
Listen to this. Go ahead.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
But one of the things he did say is that the leaks were not from, they were not from the Russians. They were an internal source from the Hillary campaign or from somebody that knew Hillary, an enemy. He does not think they're from Russians. And he said Russia got credit for something WikiLeaks should have gotten credit for.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States, and that our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity.
But it's quite something to suggest a murder. That's basically what you're doing.
Well, that others have suggested that. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich. I think it is a concerning situation. There's not a conclusion yet. We wouldn't be willing to state a conclusion, but we are concerned about it. And more importantly, a variety of WikiLeaks sources are concerned when that kind of thing happens.
So the actor that they've tried to bring in is the Russian intelligence services. Hillary Clinton stated multiple times, falsely, that 17 US intelligence agencies had assessed that Russia was the source of our publications. Okay, that's false.
Over 50,000 emails were released by WikiLeaks during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign, exposing dubious practices at the Clinton Foundation. And the Obama administration has claimed Russia was behind cyber intrusions meant to interfere with the election. However, Assange said President Barack Obama was trying to delegitimize the Trump administration and wants Americans to think President-elect Trump is not a legitimate president.
You have some familiarity with the work of Mr. Assange.
I do.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, is my view. But
well, look, I think it is clear from the indictment that came out. It's not about punishing journalism. It's about assisting the hacking of the military computer to steal information from the United States government. And look, I'll wait and see what happens with the charges and how it proceeds. But he skipped bail in the UK. Sweden had those charges, which have been dropped in the last several years. But the bottom line is he has to answer for what he has done, at least as it's been charged. I do think it's a little ironic that he may be the only foreigner that this administration would welcome to the United States.
Key part of helping President Obama get reelected in 2012, and the work we did to prepare for Hillary Clinton to be our nominee and then make sure that we could get her elected president is absolutely critical to advancing the issues and then make sure that we could get her elected president.
Some in Congress are demanding that President Obama brief them on Russian interference with the election. They say that, quote, the Russians, quote, hacked our democracy, and they're mad about it. I think it's really irresponsible for you to say you know that the Putin government did this.
You know what is irresponsible, Tucker, for you to make that claim without looking at the evidence, and more importantly...
You can't say that you know the Putin government did that.
More importantly, for the president-elect today, to say that he doesn't know whether the Russians...
Look, you're on the Intel Committee. Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's emails, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the Kremlin. You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television because
you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is perfectly
beneath your
placed.
office because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did they hack Podesta's emails? And you can't say it.
Personal insults like that, Tucker.
You just said I was carrying. You said I was carrying water for Putin. That's pretty hilarious.
You know, when you essentially are an apologist for the Kremlin, that's what you're doing.
I'm an one last time, Congressman. Look into the camera and say they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding
Tucker,
behind weasel words.
I just said that the
say they hacked John Podesta's emails.
Russians. I'm not going to be specific as.
Oh, because you don't know it. That's why. All right, done. One. You don't know it, and you're alleging it
Tucker,
without any evidence, and it's wrong.
You're ignoring the evidence because you don't care. The fact that it helped the Republican candidate is all you need to know, apparently.
That's totally false. I just think if you're going to make a serious allegation about an actual country with an actual government, you ought to know what you're talking about, and you don't.
I think that you ought to accept.
I got to go. I'm taking cash from Putin now. I'm on RT.
Republicans on the Intelligence Committee have seen for a fact.
If you could say it, you would, and you can't. And you know that.
If you're willing to be in denial about this because it suits a Republican-elect president.
Okay, whatever. You can blather on all you want, man, but I gave you a chance to state it clearly, and you wouldn't, which tells you everything you know.
You,
all right.
Or our president-elect.
Okay.
Not very much, apparently.
I appreciate that, Congressman. And now I need to take a call from Vladimir Putin, so I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second.
There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich.
Brand new bombshell in the murder of that guy right there, a DNC staffer. An investigator now says Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks.
Not only that, he claims there's been a law enforcement cover-up.
Breaking indeed and developing at a rapid pace. Bombshell new evidence of a former DNC staffer you just showed there, Seth Rich, suggests he was in communications with WikiLeaks prior to his murder last summer. Let me take you back. Here in the nation's capital, it was last July. DNC staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed on the way home from a bar in a trendy Northwest neighborhood here. Police initially saying that they believed it was a botched robbery, but questions remain with the investigation still open. Now, a year later, according to a parallel investigation by former D.C. police homicide detective Rod Wheeler, there's evidence that Rich had contact with WikiLeaks. That evidence on a laptop belonging to Seth Rich showing he was talking with WikiLeaks. Wheeler says this smells like a cover-up.
I want to find out who caused that man's death so we can put them behind bars. But if there's somebody in politics, if there's somebody in government, whether it's in the mayor's office or anywhere else in the city that's involved, you better believe they're going to be dragged in and questioned.
Wheeler's sources inside the police department also saying that they were told to stand down on the case. Police not confirming any of this with us. I've been calling the PIO number here at the D.C. Police Department. That was at 6 a.m. and I have contacts from Private Crime Stories. Nobody telling me anything. We are going to keep hunting this. It's worth noting, guys, at the time of Rich's death, his wallet was not taken, and he actually went to the hospital. He was still alive at the hospital where he died. We know nothing about what may have transpired between police investigators and Rich, but obviously Rod Wheeler looking into it. I've known Rod for a long time, and I know he's been looking into this case for a long time in a parallel investigation. This is simply developing, guys.
Not a high crime neighborhood, right?
Not at all. It's in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, one of D.C.'s, if not D.C.'s most popular neighborhood, with bars and restaurants. Very unusual and shocking when that murder occurred last July.
So the keys are in his computer.
Could be. That's what we're told.
I will be frank with you, that if I was trying to rig the outcome of this primary, trust me, I could have done, there are so many things that we could have done.
The mysterious death of DNC staffer Seth Rich. A White House petition urging Congress to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate his murder is gaining steam. However, his wallet, credit cards, and cell phone were all found at the scene. Before his murder, Rich questioned ballot integrity during the Election Data Summit.
I guess we've looked at, as an outside practitioner with a vested interest in training our voters, how do we get better access to data that tells us why ballots are rejected, why ballots are cast as provisional, so that we can analyze that and then develop better training guides?
Who was investigating several cases involving the DNC's electoral fraud and voter suppression. He was also set to testify in the case of Hillary Clinton's email investigation. Now, there is a lot of pushback against those that are even talking about this unsolved murder, and there's a media blackout. You have to wonder why there's so little interest in the murder of Rich.
The other thing that's kind of weird is that almost every person involved after he was shot seems to have a very high connection up the chain in the DNC. Officer Wingate Robinson, who was one of the first responders on there, he was actually a student at Georgetown University while John Podesta was a professor there. And Robinson's sister, Nandi, also worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign as a research associate.
I was there when he got shot, and they walked him past me so I could see him and identify him if I knew him in the neighborhood. And the police officer said he didn't even know he was shot.
Seth Rich's neighbor, Mark Mueller, who was listed on the police report, was at the scene when Rich was murdered on July 10th of last year. The eyewitness, as you heard, made a shocking statement at the vigil for the late DNC employee and WikiLeaker, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz was in attendance. The witness confirms that he was there when Seth Rich was shot and that police told him Seth didn't even know he was shot. The police report confirms not only that Seth Rich was shot, but he was badly beaten.
There is new information that could prove these theorists are in fact right. New information from the family's private investigators suggests there is tangible evidence on Seth Rich's laptop that confirms he was communicating with WikiLeaks prior to his death. Now the question is, why has DC police, as the lead agency on the investigation for the past 10 months, insisted this was a botched robbery when till this day there is no evidence to suggest that?
On July 10th, 2016, Seth Rich was murdered. But that's apparently where the line between fact and fiction begins to get a little blurred. According to the mainstream media, Seth Rich was killed after leaving a bar that night in an apparent robbery that went horribly wrong. And that's the extent of their narrative. Past that, it's all a right-wing conspiracy theory that's politically motivated and has no basis in reality.
Also interesting is, remember, it's illegal to possess these stolen documents. It's different for the media. So everything you learn about this, you're learning from us. And in full disclosure, let's take a look at what is in there and what it means. Trump said the same thing about you last night. He just got your name wrong. He called you John Podesta. He was referring to one of the emails that came out in the WikiLeaks. Now, when Secretary Clinton was asked about this, she went to the point that the campaign prefers, which is WikiLeaks is Russia infiltrating the election. True, perhaps, according to the intel agencies of the U.S. government, 17 of them. Yes, if they're stolen emails, which they are, that's a problem. But let's deal with the substance of them. Specifically, one of the ones that you wrote. Put up the email. Her inability to just do a national interview and communicate genuine feelings of remorse and regret is now, I fear, becoming a character problem. Now, this is interesting to hear that inside, you guys were having the same discussion that people were having outside. So, what happened when you said these things to Podesta and others? Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true, and I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry. The reality here is that, as Marco Rubio said, we have a Russian government, a foreign government, trying to essentially impact this election.
But Neera,
and I'm sorry, Chris, using the American media to do that. And Neera, so any email I sent was personal, from my personal account to someone else's personal account. I'm not on the campaign. I was an informal outside advisor with my own thoughts. And so, honestly, I'm just telling you right now, Chris, that the reality of this is that I think Marco Rubio is right about this, that people should not be using this as weaponizing the emails or
Neera, if this
personal emails of anyone and sending
Kelly Conway to Dave Bossy, you would be giving me all your deepest thoughts about it right now. You don't like
Chris,
it because it's your email. You're ducking it. You're not having high ground.
But let's set those accusations aside for just a moment and look at the facts. Seth left Lou's City Bar around 1:45 a.m. and refused to ride home, even though staff say that he was unusually drunk. He told them that he was heading to Wonderland Ballroom, another popular bar that was only a 10-minute walk away. But he never arrived. Staff say that he was distressed that night, noticing that something was clearly bothering Rich, who they described as normally a very good-natured guy. It would have taken Seth about half an hour to walk the mile back to his Bloomingdale Row house. But he didn't go straight home. And 2.5 hours later, at 4:19 a.m., just a block from his home, he was gunned down by unknown attackers. He was on the phone with his girlfriend at the time, and she says that she heard scuffling noises on the other end of the line, but Rich told her not to worry and hung up. Authorities say that he was shot twice in the back and had bruises on his hands, knees, and face, and appeared to have been in a scuffle with his attackers. Yet no DNA evidence has emerged from that apparent altercation. He was taken to the hospital, where he died about an hour and a half later at 5:57 a.m. It all sounds pretty straightforward. But digging deeper, holes begin to emerge. Problems start with the police claim that Rich was robbed due to a high number of recent muggings and robberies in the area. But despite having an expensive watch, wads of cash, and a mobile phone, nothing was stolen. It's pretty unusual for a robbery, but let's move on. The case gets a little stranger when you consider that before his death, Seth Rich was investigating several cases involving the DNC's electoral fraud and voter suppression, and was set to testify in the case of Hillary Clinton's email investigation. The content of his scheduled testimony isn't clear, but it does raise questions about the scandal involving the DNC. But that was all last July. To get up to speed, the case broke into the national spotlight once again on May 15th, when private investigator Rod Wheeler came forward, claiming that he was pretty sure there was more to the case than what was being reported in the news. According to Wheeler, he was in contact with a federal investigator who had personally laid eyes on Rich's laptop. An FBI forensic report made just 96 hours after Rich's death shows that he made contact with Gavin McFadden, a director of WikiLeaks and a mentor to founder Julian Assange. The federal investigator, who requested to remain anonymous, said that sometime before May 21st, 2016, Rich transferred 44,053 emails and 17,761 attachments belonging to DNC leaders. Those emails were dated from January of 2015 all the way to late May of 2016. Just 12 days after Rich was killed, WikiLeaks published the exact same number of DNC emails that were allegedly given to them by Rich, showing conspiracy against Bernie Sanders and leading to Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigning as the DNC chairperson. Incidentally, Gavin McFadden later died on October 22nd, 2016, just days before the presidential election. His cause of death was listed as lung cancer. Wheeler also stated that the D.C. police have been incredibly unhelpful, even saying that a source inside the department had told him to stand down and back off the case. A day after releasing this statement, Rod Wheeler, the private investigator, took back everything he'd said. Wheeler chalked it up to a miscommunication and said he got his story from a Fox News reporter as well as other media reports. Monday, Wheeler said on national television, quote, "My investigation up to this point shows that there was some degree of email exchange between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks." He also had this exchange with Fox 5 in D.C. "So you have sources at the FBI saying that there is information?" Wheeler responded, "For sure." Fox asked, "You have sources at the FBI saying that there is information that could link Seth Rich to WikiLeaks?" Wheeler responded, "Absolutely. Yeah, that's confirmed." So was it confirmed, or is that a miscommunication? Then on Tuesday, he came out saying, "I've never ever seen Seth Rich's computer, nor have I talked with the federal investigator." He then told CNN that he had no evidence to suggest that Rich had contacted WikiLeaks before his death. He stated flat out that his own source inside the department personally told him that he was ordered to back down. But wait, was that a miscommunication as well? Did he actually just read that from a Fox News report?
Every time I talk to the police department about the WikiLeaks or the emails, it's automatically shut down. That discussion is automatically shut down.
What could be responsible for his sudden reversal of opinion about what he actually did or didn't do? I've reached out to Mr. Wheeler, though so far he hasn't returned our calls. Of his own previous statements, the anonymous investigator that Wheeler says he did and then didn't speak with still confirmed his story, saying, quote, "I have seen and read the emails between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks." Wheeler has since received a cease and desist letter from the Rich family, who have condemned his report as a breach of contract, calling it deeply hurtful. But Wheeler's statements still contain useful insights. Before recanting his story, he explained that after he called the police to inquire about Seth, a high-ranking member of the DNC promptly phoned the police as well and then called Rich's family. Apparently, the DNC member was demanding to know why Wheeler was snooping into Rich's death. Wheeler has now revealed the high-ranking DNC official was actually Donna Brazile, the disgraced former DNC chairwoman. Brazile, a CNN contributor and donor to Hillary Clinton's campaign, was forced to step down after she was caught feeding Clinton questions ahead of her presidential debate. Wheeler said Seth Rich had been having trouble at the DNC and was clashing with someone working there. That someone turned out to be Brazile.
A high-ranking official at the DNC, when I called the police department, they got that information and called the Rich family wanting to know why was I snooping around.
But was he snooping around? Or was he just reading news articles and that was just another miscommunication? Wheeler says that he's convinced the answers to whoever is behind Rich's death are on his laptop. However, police say they don't know where the computer is, and the FBI says they don't have it. It was originally reported the FBI had conducted a forensics report of Rich's computer. But now they're claiming it's not their case, and they're referring all questions to the D.C. police. Wheeler's not the only one flip-flopping, however. After their son was murdered, Seth Rich's parents said they were open to any help to find the killer or killers. They even suggested they weren't sure it was a robbery.
If it was a robbery, it failed because he still had his watch, he still had his money, he still had his credit cards, he still had his phone.
But their attitudes have changed since then, and now they say it was just a robbery, and anyone contradicting that is simply peddling fake evidence. What brought about that change? It might have happened around the time they brought on Brad Bauman to be their family spokesman. Bauman is a professional crisis consultant, and according to him, every single time a story is reported, it is just hearsay, it's lies, it's politically driven or politically motivated hearsay. And it actually causes the opposite of what everyone wants. It causes the inability for the police and for the independent investigators to figure out what actually happened. But who is Bauman? Well, he's been called a professional Democrat by WikiLeaks and has frequently criticized both Republicans and President Trump, who he says is simply playing the American people and has no respect for the country. He also said the Republican Party is full of, quote, scam artists, hucksters, and sociopaths trying to screw you. He works for the Pastorum Group, which describes itself as a full-service, progressive, values-first communications and political strategy firm working with progressive candidates, causes, and coalitions to create meaningful social change. While there, he pushed hard for progressive agenda items and founded the Progressive Action PAC. After all that, it seems doubtful Bauman would have any kind of bias. Yet according to Bauman, anyone who questions Seth Rich's murder was anything more than a robbery deserves a special place in hell. Strong words from a DNC hardliner. And who's paying for his services? Is the Pastorum Group working for free? Is the DNC footing the bill for Baumann services? Clearly, the DNC, whose leaked emails revealed a conspiracy to undermine Bernie Sanders' campaign, would have no agenda in controlling the narrative around Seth Rich's murder either. And what about the DNC? Where do they stand in this investigation? Well, in our investigation, one name pops up over and over again. John Podesta. During Hillary's campaign, Podesta was her right-hand man, her former campaign chief, who had tens of thousands of his own emails leaked to the press by WikiLeaks. In those emails, Podesta makes a shocking statement back in 2015 concerning potential leakers. He says, quote, "I'm definitely for making an example of a suspected leaker, whether or not we have any real basis for it." That's pretty startling considering his apparent ties to the Seth Rich murder investigation. Where do those ties begin? Well, for starters, with Officer Robert Wingate Robinson. Robinson was one of the first responding officers who showed up after Seth Rich was shot. He was also a student at Georgetown University at the same time that John Podesta was a professor there. And Robinson's sister, Nandy, worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign as a research associate in 2016. Since last May, she's been the deputy research director at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in D.C. But Podesta's ties don't end there. Seth Rich wasn't dead when Officer Robinson arrived. Police reports say that he was still alive and was talking to the officers and the EMTs. He was taken to Washington Hospital Center, where an unnamed fourth-year surgery resident says that he treated Rich's injuries. The anonymous resident posted online detailing Rich's wounds and explaining that he was shot in the lower back, damaging his liver and leaving several small bowel injuries. The resident, whose story can't be independently verified at this time, said that Rich didn't have any major vascular injuries, and personally he had seen dozens of other cases which were much worse, and the patient had still survived. The resident claimed that nothing about Rich's injuries suggested that he had sustained a fatal wound. However, the resident was then told by the attending physician that he was not to make any more rounds on Seth Rich, who was being surrounded by LEOs, or law enforcement officers. The resident says that no one was allowed to see Rich before he died except the attending physician. That night, the attending physician was Dr. Jack Sava. Sava's been a doctor since 2001 and has been a big supporter of Hillary Clinton, even donating $2,700 to her campaign in 2016. He was also on John Podesta's guest list for a Democratic function. Sava was also a frequent visitor to the White House. In fact, he visited the White House a total of 6 times before the night of Seth Rich's murder. His wife visited a whopping 23 times. And Jack Sava and his wife weren't the only ones visiting the White House either. According to official visitors' logs, Joe Capone, the manager of Lou's City Bar, the last place Seth Rich was seen before being shot, also visited the White House. Logs show that Capone stopped by on July 6th, just 4 days before Seth was shot and killed. And here's proof. A picture Capone took from inside the White House and posted online. The picture has since been taken down. The logs also show that he got a meeting in the East Wing, which makes him very special indeed, since that's the area reserved as office space for the First Lady and her staff. And finally, there's Heather Podesta, John's former sister-in-law. Heather serves on the board of the Washington, D.C. Police Foundation right alongside Police Chief Kathy Lanier. Lanier was the chief when Seth Rich was murdered in July, but then stepped down the next month. Heather is also the ex-wife of John Podesta's brother, Tony, whose Podesta Group is one of the most powerful and well-connected lobby organizations in the U.S.
Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email?
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
Ed Tucker.
And their story has changed as well. There was a major discrepancy in the Metropolitan PD's press release, which originally stated that officers first heard gunshots and then responded to the shooting. The later reports insist that officers only found out about the shooting later from an alert on their digital audio surveillance system. There are still a lot of dots to connect and a lot of gaps that don't make sense. According to the mainstream media and Democrats in Washington, Seth Rich's case is a wild goose chase. The real culprits are in Moscow. The story goes that it's actually Russian hackers who broke into the DNC servers and leaked thousands of emails, costing Hillary Clinton the election. They claim that President Trump and his team was colluding with Moscow and Vladimir Putin to discredit Hillary just in time to turn the American public against her in the voting booths. And since they say there's no evidence that Seth Rich was a leaker and that his investigation is a conspiracy theory, surely they've got evidence that it was Russia involved, right? Well, not so far. Despite John Podesta attacking the First Amendment rights of the free press and calling Sean Hannity and Newt Gingrich disgusting for questioning Seth Rich's murder, there's still no evidence that Russia was involved in the election in any way. While Podesta says the questions about Seth Rich's murder are more examples of fake news from the Russians, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein says that so far he's seen no proof of any crime that was committed or that any prosecution is warranted. There's been nothing found to suggest the Kremlin ever hacked the DNC or that the Trump campaign was involved. Ignoring a total lack of evidence, Democrats insist their case is the truth. But there are a lot of wild geese to simply dismiss them all, especially when those behind the massive leaks that exposed the DNC in the first place say there's something going on. Assange strongly implied that Rich was his informant, though he stopped short of saying it. WikiLeaks isn't offering the only proof. Famed international hacker Kim.com has come out and said that he personally knew Seth Rich and that, in fact, Rich handed over the trove of DNC emails to WikiLeaks. Kim claims that Rich went by the online name Panda and contacted him explaining that he was developing voter analytics tools and other technologies to expose corruption and the influence of corporate money in politics. Supporting his claim that Rich was Panda, Seth appeared to use the online handle Panda for Progress for his Twitter and Instagram accounts. Seth also had 2 Skype accounts linked to his second Gmail address, which was also Panda for Progress. Kim has called Seth Rich a hero and promised to deliver evidence to Congress proving that he was the source for WikiLeaks' DNC emails. Adding to the growing doubts over the DNC's official line, Seth's murder wasn't the only peculiar death that summer. On June 22nd, former UN President John Ashe was found dead, with authorities first reporting his death as a heart attack. They later changed their story after an autopsy report showed that he died due to a crushed windpipe. Ashe died just a few days before he was set to testify with his co-defendant, Nlak Sun, a Chinese businessman who illegally funneled millions of dollars to American businessman Charlie Tree, who then used the money to donate to the DNC during Bill Clinton's re-election. Charlie Tree was also rumored to be a Clinton Foundation donor during Bill Clinton's reign as president. Prosecutors accused Ashe of accepting thousands of dollars in bribes from the Chinese businessman when he served as a UN president in 2013, the same year that Hillary Clinton served as Secretary of State. According to a letter sent by more than 60 members of the House, the Clinton Foundation is a lawless, pay-to-play enterprise that has been operating under a cloak of philanthropy for years. Solving this case could reveal important clues into the 2016 election and how high up corruption at the DNC really went. So far, One American News, WikiLeaks, the D.C. Metropolitan Police, and even a Republican lobbyist, Jack Berkman, have all put substantial money towards finding Seth Rich's killer, totaling $250,000. But up to this point, the DNC has never offered any reward for information to help solve the murder of their own staffer. His death has received almost no attention, though to be fair, the DNC did dedicate a bike rack in his honor. And Hillary Clinton took the opportunity to use his death as a chance to push her agenda for more gun control.
He was just 27 years old. Surely we can agree that weapons of war have no place on the streets of America.
For now, there are no clear answers as to who killed Seth Rich or why. Police have called it a robbery, but have no proof. There's growing evidence that it was something much more than a mugging gone wrong, but everyone on the left insists that it's nothing more than a conspiracy theory and coincidence. But it's not just one coincidence or two. It's dozens, and they trace their way all the way to the highest branches of the DNC. Yes, it could be a coincidence that the officers were wearing body cameras, but the footage apparently can't be found. It could be a coincidence that the attending physician has direct ties to Hillary's right-hand man, John Podesta. And it could be a coincidence that Seth's father said that a security camera from a small convenience store across the street captured video of their son collapsing at the feet of 2 men, and that police say that now that footage doesn't exist. But the question we must ask ourselves now is, at what point does one coincidence or 100 add up to something approaching the truth.
While One America conducts its in-depth investigation, Judicial Watch is also taking action to solve unanswered questions surrounding that death.
Tom, I just wanted to ask you, I know that you've begun an investigation into the death of the DNC staff member, Seth Rich. A lot of people have been asking questions, apparently some possibly suspicious circumstances, a lot of questions, and nobody seems to have the answers. What are you doing, and why have you begun to get involved in this issue?
Well, there's a lot of public controversy about his death, and what we are able to do is use the Freedom of Information laws maybe to get answers and settle the controversies one way or another. There are concerns about the handling of the police investigation and whether there was a political meddling in it. And to that end, just last week, we filed Freedom of Information requests here in the District of Columbia with the police department and the mayor's office. And also, but even last year, we had filed a request with the FBI about Seth Rich because there were reports back then that he was a cooperating witness. We didn't get a records response. They said they didn't find anything, but we don't know. And then secondly, we have a separate FOIA for the DNC hack itself, because the WikiLeaks people are hinting, and I don't know if they're just playing with us or telling the truth, that Seth Rich was a source for some of the DNC emails that were hacked or leaked to the media last year. So we have a lawsuit about that DNC hacking attempt at the federal level. Typically, the agencies have a few weeks to respond, and if, depending on the nature of the response, we're able to go to court to either force the release of records or challenge their failure to respond.
Do you think it's a little bit curious, for instance, that perhaps the Democratic National Committee or some perhaps Democrats in Congress have not gone in ahead of organizations like yours and others who are beginning to ask these kinds of questions?
Well, I think they're upset that the questions are being asked because it detracts from their conspiracy theory of the election, which is the Russians elected Donald Trump. And I don't understand why they're so sensitive about this. As an official of the Democratic Party or a staff from the Democratic Party who was murdered, you would think they want to solve the crime too. And I suspect they do, but they don't like anyone asking any questions beyond suggesting it was just the typical random act of violence here in the District of Columbia. Because it distracts from their conspiracy theory that they're running with, which is that Donald Trump shouldn't be president.
Over the summer, WikiLeaks began divulging thousands of pages of documents and emails stolen from the Democratic National Committee and, most recently, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, all in an effort, said Assange himself, to damage her presidential candidacy. Now, a new twist in this saga. In a statement issued yesterday, Ecuador said it had cut off Assange's internet access, saying, in part, the government of Ecuador respects the principle of non-intervention in the internal affairs of other states. It does not interfere in external electoral processes, nor does it favor any particular candidate.
We are not a British colony, and that's Ecuador's reply to a British government threat to storm its London embassy and take Julian Assange by force. The whistleblower sought refuge there in June, escaping imminent extradition to Sweden.
That announcement was made by Ecuador's Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino, who during a press conference also said that Britain has threatened to storm Ecuador's embassy in London to arrest Julian Assange. Mr. Patino said that Ecuador had received from Britain, quote, a written threat that could assault our embassy, unquote, if Assange was not handed over to British authorities.
The Ecuadorian consulate where Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, is living was just broken into, a foiled plot there.
The US Senate Intelligence Committee has sent a letter to Julian Assange asking him to testify on alleged Russian meddling in America's 2016 presidential election. Well, let's get more details now from Anna-Cecilia Chalkner.
This letter is addressed to Julian Assange, basically calling upon him to testify in what is being described as a closed interview at a mutually convenient time and location. And we have seen the WikiLeaks or Julian Assange Assange's legal team already react to this letter, saying they would be open to this kind of testimony, but it must conform to a high ethical standard. So we'll be keeping an eye on when exactly this happens and whether or not some kind of information comes out of what is discussed.
Mr. Assange clearly has not made friends with Washington in recent years after disclosing very confidential and classified memos and cables from the U.S. government, and many cables and memos which were quite embarrassing for the government. But the U.S. government has not made comments in recent days over Assange, but ultimately many experts believe that if Julian Assange ends up in America, he will forever stay in the custody of U.S. officials, either indefinite detention or prison, a life in prison. Some believe he could face up to capital punishment. So, of course, within the next day or so, there will be a lot of developments in the case and saga surrounding Julian Assange and all the countries that are now involved.
Hello, I am from the British government with a fabulous announcement. No, I'm sorry, we still haven't sorted out this bleeding shit show, but we have finally managed to arrest our most wanted criminal. No, the other one, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Once we're done, we'll extradite his skippy ass off to Virginia to face a grand jury. Because we're America's bitch. We'd like to thank all who aided us in this operation, especially the Ecuadorian government.
Hola, I'm from the Ecuadorian government, and I'm here to confirm that our new president is America's bitch too. That is why he agreed to cancel Harry Hacker's political asylum and let pigs enter our embassy to arrest him. ¿Será que nos pueden dar nuestro crédito el FMI ahora, por favor?
Hello, I'm from the Australian government. Since Mr. Assange is our citizen, we feel compelled to state in the strongest possible terms that we're America's bitch too. That's why both of these bung stains will leave him up shit creek without a paddle. After all, we're the same dickholes who are prosecuting whistleblowers and banning encryption to make it harder for journalists to expose our shit fuckery. Hello, I'm from the US government. We're grateful to all our bitches for handing over Julian Julian Assange, who is wanted on charges of making us look like war criminals. Which of course we are. We have indicted the accused for the crime of helping his source to anonymously access documents in the public interest, otherwise known as good journalism. Journalists, of course, are not supposed to be good. They're meant to be piss weak on questioning stenographers who publish what we tolerate. By extraditing a foreign journalist, we hope to send a clear warning to all journalists not to mess with our shit. We ask all of you to cooperate with us in setting this dangerous precedent by focusing on how the accused is a bit of an asshole instead of our attempt to destroy your press freedom. American Empire.